Check out the merchandise available for purchase. Purchase merchandise, click on the links available in the video description. Thanks. These tees can be purchased on black, white, or gray backgrounds. Please smash the bell icon to be notified of new content. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share. Thanks for watching.
President Biden today signing a bill to combat the growing number of hate incidents against Asian Americans, more than 6,600 in 1 year. Kristen Welker is at the White House for us. Kristen, there was broad support for this.
Lester, there are few bipartisan moments in Washington, but this was one of them. President Biden signing legislation that aims to combat the recent rise in hate crimes, particularly against Asian Americans. The bill improves hate crime tracking and bolsters support for state and local officials. The president called hatred and racism the ugly poison that has long haunted our nation. It's worth noting this was one of the first large indoor gatherings of the Biden administration, almost everyone without a mask.
Here, check my bag. I'm telling you, I don't have it.
Check the bag. Check the bag.
Just lock it up.
Stay here. Yeah, let her check the bag. Oh, please. Huh?
No, I did not.
Did she pay for it? Did she pay for it? I'm calling the police right now. No.
You know what? Y'all can. I'm a female, so I'm a female. Are you serious?
Yes, I need it.
No, I did not.
You hit me?
Now, this punk didn't hesitate to use violence against this black woman. He didn't even prove that she stole anything, but he attacked her. There's no media coverage about this.
The address is Misha. It's down at Wilson Boulevard. Wilson Boulevard.
I cannot believe.
One man and one woman.
Get off me! I was not stealing.
You still
No, I was not. You check my purse. Get off.
You hit me.
No.
Get off me. Cause you're tripping.
Now you notice he said to her, you hit me, even though he was the one who attacked her.
Yeah, let it go.
I'm not going nowhere.
She's not able to get out.
I'm not going nowhere. You're choking me. You're choking me. You might hurt her.
Just lay down and relax, baby girl.
Just lay down, baby.
Just relax.
Please lay down. For him.
So he can stop tussling with you.
Yes, I cannot
But no,
Just calm down.
Just chill.
They're inside the store here. They're inside the store here.
Let me put my shoe on. Cannot believe this. Like,
Gray shirt. Right there.
New at noon, the NAACP is calling for a boycott of a Charlotte beauty supply store after the owner was caught on cell phone video kicking and choking an African-American woman, Ticklison.
check my bag. I'm telling you, I don't have it.
It started off when the owner says the woman shoplifted a product that quickly then escalated to the physical fight you're seeing here. In the video, you see the owner on the ground and then put her in a chokehold. On Sunday, the NAACP held a protest.
He took it upon himself to treat her in the ways that no woman should be treated. In fact, no person should be treated.
I wasn't crazy, you know. No matter what's the reason, but I feel very sorry to her.
That was the owner, who says he does apologize. He also
I'm Los Angeles Times columnist Pat Morrison. In March of 1991, first there was the videotaped beating of Rodney King, and less than 2 weeks later, there was the videotaped killing of a 15-year-old black teenager named Latasha Harlins. The woman who shot her, a Korean shopkeeper named Soon Ja-do, was convicted of voluntary manslaughter but served no jail time, and that sentence, as much as the Rodney King case, tended to influence what happened more than a year later in the riots in Los Angeles where Korean shopkeepers were targeted. Now Brenda E. Stevenson, who's a history professor at UCLA, has written a book called The Contested Murder of Latasha Harlins about those events, delving into the case and the three women, the victim, the shopkeeper, and the judge, who were so involved in this decision that made such ripples to this day, still does, throughout the African American community. Brenda Stevenson, the subject of my column, Pat Morrison Asks, in the Los Angeles Times.
Let me say this. As I watched the video of the defendant entering the lobby of the Pink House, I couldn't help but get the impression that he was entering with a serious mind of doing his job of protecting the people of Pink Houses. Shooting that gun and killing somebody was probably the last thing in his mind, and probably never entered his mind at all. This was not an intentional act. This was an act of criminal negligence. And as such, I find that incarceration is not necessary. And also, as far as the recommendation by the district attorney for home confinement of 6 months, I find that instead of sitting at home for 6 months and spending money to ensure that he stays at home, I think it will be much more productive if he spent additional time on community service. Accordingly, I sentenced the defendant as follows. On the count of criminally negligent homicide, sentence to the court is 5 years probation plus 800 hours of community service. This is 500 hours that the DA recommended plus another 300 hours. So this will take close to about 5 months.
Now what a coincidence. The defendant is Asian and the judge is Asian. You think he didn't have a little sympathy for him? No jail time, 5 years probation and community service? What a coincidence.
The motion to set aside the jury verdict. My decision is that it is granted in part and denied in part. It's granted to the limited extent that the jury verdict that found the defendant guilty of manslaughter in the second degree is modified and reduced to criminally negligent homicide, which is still a felony, but that's a Class E non-violent felony. This was not...
Now this was not an accident. I mean, how many times do black people get this type of sympathy?
Incarceration is not necessary.
I mean, he even reduced the sentence that the jury agreed upon.
Peter Liang. Originally delayed sentencing with regard to the death of Akai Gurley happened on Tuesday. Brooklyn State Supreme Court Justice Danny Chun took the time to hear statements from the prosecution, the defense, Akai Gurley's family, and Peter Liang himself before, in an unusual move, as you just saw, reducing the jury verdict from reckless manslaughter to criminally negligent homicide, also a felony. sentencing Peter Liang to 800 hours of community service and 5 years of probation. Joining me now with reaction to all of that is Akai Gurley's aunt, Hortensia Peterson, who joins us yet again, and AM New York reporter Allison Fox. Thank you both for spending some time with us here. So we can set the stage for our viewers here. You may well know this, but a trial judge does have the ability to reduce a jury's verdict or even toss out a jury's verdict if the judge finds that that's against what's called the weight of the evidence. But it is rarely done. Right? Judge does not have the ability to increase a verdict, but can decrease or toss out a verdict. Judge Chun decided, for the reasons he articulated here, to do that before imposing sentence. So, Ms. Peterson, let me ask you first, did you have any inkling or any suspicion at all from any of the people you had spoken with, or Akai Gurley's family have any inkling or suspicion that the judge was indeed going to do this and reduce this down to criminally negligent homicide?
No, everything was a shock yesterday.
And what was your reaction to it?
My reaction was, are you kidding me? Unbelievable. And I'm going to keep repeating and I'm going to keep saying, Akai Gurley, an innocent victim, murdered by a rookie cop that's not being held accountable for his murder. On top of that, for the judge, for the DA, for the whole entire system, failed not only Akai Gurley, also failed Akyla Gurley, Sylvia Palmer. It's a decision no one was expecting.
I'm going to come back to you in a minute about that. But Allison, as somebody who has covered this trial in this case, and it's been a case with all sorts of twists and turns, were you at all surprised by that decision by the judge?
I think everybody was surprised. I don't think anybody was expecting that kind of an outcome. When Brooklyn DA Ken Thompson recommended...
I don't understand why people are surprised.
Obviously holds a lot of weight.
Here is an Asian judge and an Asian defendant.
The sentence of no jail time was definitely
I can see that he showed clear bias.
Was expecting him to overturn one of the charges.
And I think it's important, again, for the viewers to realize that this was not a case where, we heard the judge mention it, but again, let me ask you from your perspective here, this is not a case of intentional conduct, correct?
Well, I think that when Justice Chun charged the jury with their deliberations, he said that they had to find that Peter Liang knew the risk and disregarded that risk.
That's the classic definition of reckless conduct. You knew there was a risk there. You didn't intend to do what happened, but you knew that there was a risk if you engaged in certain conduct that certainly could happen.
So the jury obviously found that he did know that risk and disregarded that risk, and found him guilty on all charges. I think that Justice Chun decided that the actions did not fit the requirements for manslaughter and did, however, fit the requirements for criminally negligent homicide. That's why he chose to do what he did.
And Ms. Peterson, you and I had this conversation before when you visited us last, and I know that emotionally, and for very good reasons, you would be upset at this. But if you're able to sort of step back for a second and look at it through the legalities, if indeed it wasn't Peter Liang's intention to harm your nephew, Akai Gurley, but he did, as the jury determined he did, he acted recklessly here. Can you at least see, you don't have to agree with it, but could you at least see why it is that the judge decided to take this approach here, not put him in jail, and take this down a notch to criminally negligent homicide? Can you understand his reasoning, even if though you might not agree with it?
I don't agree, and I don't see the reasoning. I'm going to stick with what I saw, what I believe. My nephew is no longer here. Had the shoe been on the other foot, had it been a civilian, had it been Akai Gurley that shot Peter Liang, Akai Gurley would be up the river. First of all, let's be real now. Akai Gurley would be in prison from day one. He would not have gotten a chance to speak or say anything. Peter Liang took a life. It's about a human life that was taken. So Peter Liang needs to be held accountable. Whether or not it was intent, we don't know exactly what happened, what was going through Peter Liang's mind at that time. But common sense will tell you, if you're going into a dark stairwell or any dark place, why would you have your gun out? There's a possibility. This is the recklessness. There is a possibility. This is a place, the pink houses is a place where families, children use those stairwells.
And that was essentially the prosecution's
Yes.
argument here.
They use
yes,
it
you have to recognize
any
a risk
time
if
of the
you do
day of the night. It's being used. And it's not the first time Peter Liang have been in the pink houses. It's not the first time him and his partner have went through those stairwell. Why this night you decide, because you heard a noise. That noise that you heard, that no one else heard but your partner heard, caused my nephew to lose his life.
Allison, we know that the Gurley family was not happy with this reaction. What was with this result? What was the reaction of Peter Liang and his supporters to this result?
Well, they were obviously happy.
Rejoicing.
I found it interesting that yesterday, as everybody sort of waited for the judge to render his sentence, outside the courthouse, there was one side of the street had supporters for Akai Gurley and his family, and the other side of the street had quite a number of supporters for Peter Liang and his family. And I believe they were both kind of chanting the same thing. They were both chanting for justice. They obviously had different definitions of what justice is, but they both wanted justice.
What's next legally in terms of this case? What do we expect to see?
So the Brooklyn DA actually also was not very happy with the judge's decision. He has vowed to appeal that decision. He said he respectfully disagrees.
He can, again, so viewers understand, the prosecutor couldn't appeal the jury's verdict, but he can appeal when a judge changes a verdict. So
Yes.
he has the capacity to do that. So interestingly, we've heard that. And what about Peter Liang's side?
They have vowed to appeal as well.
Right. So we have appeals coming from both sides on this. The case will continue. Hortensia Peterson, thank you again. I know it's difficult for coming in and sharing your thoughts with us. Allison Box, thanks so much for your perspectives as a reporter on this. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
The Chinese American community in New York City is donating thousands of dollars to help Peter Liang. He's a former police officer found guilty of second-degree manslaughter in the shooting of an unarmed Brooklyn resident. CCTV's Li-Ling Tan spoke to one organization hoping the money will help appeal his conviction.
The Lin Sing Association is fronted by a small, inconspicuous doorway on Mott Street in New York City's Chinatown. For decades, this has been the go-to place for many Chinese Americans in need of help. But now, cash and check donations have been pouring in support of former New York police officer Peter Liang.
It's already more than 350,000 until today, more than 350,000.
Eddie Chu heads up the organization and says he has just this week personally given the bulk of the donations to Peter Liang for his legal costs.
Around $250,000 is take care of the attorney fee. My issue is that we raise the money for Peter for legal fee.
Ex-police officer Peter Liang was convicted in February over the 2014 shooting death of Akai Gurley, an unarmed resident of this Brooklyn housing project where Liang was patrolling when his gun went off. The conviction outraged Chinese American communities across the nation, who say Liang is being used as a scapegoat after other police officers, mostly white men, weren't indicted in similar high-profile cases involving the deaths of unarmed black men.
I was here 40 years in Chinatown, and we're doing a lot of big cases here. But this time, I can say all the Chinese, everybody is very angry about this case, very angry. A lot of the senior people, they live in the senior housing, they're getting the government's benefit, low income, and everybody come up here to line up $5, $20, every day, long lines here for donate the money to Peter.
Mr. Chu showed me the donor logs, pages and pages of record keeping, as checks continue to come in by mail from across the nation.
HI, I don't know what is it.
Hawaii.
And also Illinois, CA, California. We got all kind of check from all over the country.
Mr. Chu tells me that with these funds, Liang has a new legal team. I've spoken to New York attorney Paul Schechtman, who confirms that Liang has hired him, and Professor Gabriel Jack Chin of UC Davis School of Law. Liang's lawyers have until Tuesday to ask the court to reconsider the conviction. Li Lingtan, CCTV, New York.
Black people have been treated badly, killed, and suffered from racist behavior for too long. Now the Democrats and Republicans came together to reach a bipartisan bill to stop violence against Asians. How come they had not used this energy to pass the George Floyd police reform bill or the anti-lynching law? What do you think would have happened if the roles were reversed and there was a black cop who shot an Asian or white person under the same circumstances? This is why the George Floyd police reform bill and the anti-lynching law need to be passed now. Please comment. I would like to know how you feel about the content of this video. If you haven't already, subscribe and hit the notification bell icon to be notified of new video content. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching In the Name of Justice. Listen, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the bell notification, and please share your comments. I'd like to know what you guys think about the video. Thanks for watching.